Hi, I'm Lars. Welcome back to the shop. This video is going to be about doing maintenance on your Onefinity Elite Foreman. Well, some things that you're going to need to do this is you're going to need some 3-in-1 oil, you're going to need a rag, a can of air, spray air, or a air compressor with a spray nozzle on it will also work. A vacuum is also a really good thing to have standing by. So let's get into this. The maintenance, the basic maintenance that you need to do falls into 3 categories. One is after every carve, one is every 2 to 3 hours, and then the other one is about every 1 to 4 weeks, depending on how many jobs you run through your machine. So after every carve and project, you want to vacuum up everything on the table, get all the chips out of the way, because just chips laying around is really bad. It can bust a bit, it can get bound on it. Make sure that you wipe down your rails, wipe down the ball screws, make sure you're checking for sawdust laying in here, wipe down your spindles, make sure it pretty much looks like it did when you got it. It's the way that I look at it. And you want to do this after every carve that you do, and if you're doing really long projects and stuff that are going to take hours to get done, about every 2 to 3 hours to do it. Every month would be a really good spot to hit. Make sure you check your ball screws oil wells, all right? And we'll get into that here in a little bit. So let me show you what's the mechanism in the gantry and what you're actually looking for. So this is the left side of the X gantry, and as you can see, there's a lot of dirt that's up around these rails. Okay, so this is one thing that you definitely want to clean off. You want to make sure that this is off of here. To be honest with you, I highly doubt it could get in underneath these bearings, but it's always good to be safe. Inside of this hole here, and I don't know what to call the hole, but this is where your screw ball bearing is in. So they recommend keeping this thing cleaned out. Now, I've seen videos online where people haven't cleaned this out daily, or at least when they're done, they haven't done this proper basic maintenance, and they've taken these things apart, and when you do, these are just gunked up. Then you got to clean them out, and it's really hard on your bearings. So it's good to take an air compressor, an air can, and blow some air in here and make sure that everything's out of there. After every, like I said, after every carve, and every time, about every 2 to 3 hours, you get a really long carve. I take a cable tie, cut off, and I'll dip it down in here to make sure I'm hitting things that are solid, to make sure I don't have anything that's gunked up. For this next step, we're going to put the oil in the oil port, then we're going to run it to the end, back to the middle, put more oil in it, and then run it to the front and back to the middle and put more oil in it. This is not to oil your ball screw, okay? I know a lot of people think it is, but basically what my interpretation of this is, and this is all on me, is you're putting oil in the port and you're filling it up, and as you're running it, you're pushing oil through the bearing and basically pushing the debris out. So you're doing a flush, if you will. That's my interpretation, all right? The only reason I'm saying that is because I've done that in the machining world for quite a bit. Not exactly with something like this, but we used oil to flush out debris. I don't see any other reason to oil these screws, because all it's going to do is attract sawdust, and sawdust is going to stick to it, and it's going to make your life worse. So I think what we're doing is we're actually flushing the bearing out. So if you were standing at the front of your machine right now, this would be the rail on the right, better known as the B gantry. Now, there's an old school bearing, and that has a port right on the bearing. For the Elite system, their gantry is where the oil port is, and it's sitting right here, okay? So this is where you want to put your oil in, and when you fill it, you want to make sure that oil is coming out of it. So you put oil in, squeeze the can until you see something like that where it's bubbling up on the outside. And don't crank this bearing down, this Allen screw down, just tighten it up a little bit. At this point in time, I would look on the rails again and the spindle to make sure there's no sawdust laying on them, and make sure that around these bearings here that you don't have any sawdust on these either, and just wipe them off. So we just did the B rail, and now the next thing to do is the Y rail and then the X rail. Now everybody hates doing the X rail because in order to do the X rail, you got to take your spindle or your router, the whole mechanism off the machine, okay? Because you can't get to that screw in the back. So the Y rail is exactly the same process as the B rail, and all right, so once again, this is the gantry for the X axis, and we got to do the same thing here. Is we got to take this off and open it up. Now this is the bigger issue for me, so we're going to shut the machine down here for a second. All right, so doing this with your X gantry is not as easy as the B and the Y, because this has got your Z axis on it, your Z gantry on it. So you got to take your spindle off or your router off. You got to make sure you're disconnected from this, because this has got to run back and forth. So I'm going to take my Z gantry out of the way. So I'm going to get the Z gantry out of the way. I'm going to take these lines across the back, and then we're going to do the same thing we did on the other ones. So doing this on the X gantry is a little more difficult. The reason is you got to get your, like I said, you got to get your spindle out of the way. You got to disconnect everything. In order to do that, you need to turn your machine off. If you were to turn your machine on right now, you're going to get all kinds of homing errors because there's not a signal going back. So sorry about this, but the only thing you can do is fill this hole with oil. And you're going to want to make sure you keep an eye on this because it will get on your wasteboard, and push this easily all the way to one side, and then pull it back to the center. And keep an eye on your cables, make sure they're not getting in the way. And then fill it back up. And again, it'll move. Don't worry about it. It will move. And then bring it back to the center. Well, I guess bring it back to where you had it. And then fill that back up with oil, and then put your screw back in. And again, you don't need to crank these things down tight, but real tight. They just need to be tight, snug. And again, you can see that this moves pretty easily. Now, the next part is messing with the Z gantry, and this is a truly everything that everybody hates working on. So this is the Z gantry, and I've taken the spindle off. This is something that is in your eye all the time when you're doing work. You always see it because you're always watching it. So always try to keep this sprayed off. This is where those little cans of spray are coming really handy, and you can get stuff, get them sprayed off. Now this one you can see a little better on the bottom. You want to keep this clean, and I don't know if you can see if I get the right angle, up inside of this gantry well, but it does have dirt in it, and it doesn't surprise me because you've got, it's the closest to the cut. So I'm going to try to dig this out of here, but as you can see, there is some sawdust up in there, but it's something that you just want to keep sprayed out, oiled out, you know, whatever. Alright, on the Z-Gantry, these have got the, which I'm going to call the old school ball screws on them. It takes a 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench, and all you want to do is just loosen this up, maybe 2 turns, and then stop. And you're going to have to play with this. You're going to have to figure out where it's at, and then make sure you don't over tighten these back down. So I'm going to take 2 turns out of this one, and then you can take an Allen wrench or something and try to move that screw, get that to unscrew out of there. So you start unscrewing this out just by pushing it, and you'll see the dirt that's on it. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but that's the dirt that's on it. So you want to clean that off of there with a rag, with a brush, something. But you need to get that off of there. So you run that one up, and looks like the inside of it looks pretty good. It's not really gunked up. It's got some stuff in it. So this is where you're going to flush this out with oil. You're going to put a bunch of oil in here, and then you're going to run this up and down and hopefully get this stuff out. And you'll see it comes out onto the spindle itself. But whatever you do, do not take this completely apart. Take these bushings off of here. Alright, so that looks pretty clean. Just keep kind of wiping it until you get it as clean as you can get it. And then move this back up into it. And then just keep turning the bush, the little white thing, the washer bushing thing, until it goes down in there. Now, once you get it cleaned off, you get it back in, take the set screw out, and then dump this on its side, put this, lay it down, and fill that hole with oil, and then move this back and forth, and see if you can flush any more debris out. I don't have a lot of debris in here, so it's not going to be that bad. And then put this set screw back in. Now, when you're putting these in, just barely put them in far enough so that you can feel it hit the white bearing washer thing. But you don't want to, there you go. You just want to get it snug. You don't want to really grind it in there. That would be bad. But this is the reason a lot of people don't like messing with the Z, because it's hard to get to these 2 screws, especially the one in the back. You gotta take this thing completely apart. But you're only doing this about every month. Ooh, another screw fell out. There's another one of those bearings on the bottom of this, these little white guys, I do not know how to dig that one out of there, except for just trying to hit it with a Allen wrench, but I've never been able to get it out. But mine looks really clean. I keep the passageway at the bottom really clean, so I think I'm okay. And then make sure everything's cleaned up best you can get it, and then we'll hang it back up on the Z-Gantry. And remember, when you're tightening these guys back up, before you get them tight, make sure you get a square and set this down on your wasteboard, and make sure that this thing is square. This is called, side tramming. But mine seems to be square. And then cross tighten your bolts. Don't tighten one side and or the top and then do the bottom. Make sure you do like one bottom, one top. But this is one of the things a lot of people forget to do is tram their device to make sure everything's square. And we are good. All the bits and pieces seem to be here. Make sure we get this guy tight. Okay. Make sure we get no alarms on our Masso. Get the standard alarm, E-stop. If something was not connected right, you would be getting a Z alarm here, or an X, be a Z alarm, because if I didn't get the cables up. Stop. Home it. I've got mine homing X and Y at the same time, and I've got videos out on that if you want to learn how to do that. There's my Y, and then my X is going to home, and you can adjust the speed of your homing and everything else, and that shows all that stuff. And we are home, so now I zero out my X and my Y, and I always leave my Z up here at the height because my Z 0 is not my spoil board. Okay, real quick before we end this video, those of you that have just gone through all this, your Z may drop a little quicker now that you've got it cleaned up. Alright, so there's one thing when you hit emergency stop with the Massos, and unless you have a braking motor on the top, which I do not, alright, and it'll drop. So let me show you guys something that I do. I have a 2x4 that I set here on the side. Now, when I home my machine, and I recommend everybody to do this, so you've got this machine, homed, back off the Y a little bit, back off the X a little bit, and bring your Z down. Now, I don't drop it onto the block. If it drops, it drops. This lets me know. Normally it doesn't drop. Now the reason I do this, I keep this off of the X and the Y, is because you have to home your machine every single time you boot it up. Alright? And usually you're going to have to run it back, run it over, and drop it down anyway. So I just park it here, and then when I come in I can hit home, and it homes really quick, and I can get started on my day. So something else I want to cover here too is you can clean your machine all the time, and I highly recommend cleaning your machine as often as you can. If you're sitting there and you're watching it run, get up, walk around. If you see a bunch of sawdust on one of the rails, vacuum it off, wipe it off. That will help you in the maintenance. The hardest part is doing the oil, which what we just did. All right, filling those oil parts and doing the Z is kind of a pain in the butt, but it has to be done. So in order to keep your machine running, you don't want to have to go buy new bearings, new ball screws, new screws, and take this whole thing completely apart, because that could take a while to get there. So keep it clean, but I will tell you, once you're done cutting, I don't care if you have a dust collector or you don't have a dust collector. I do not have a dust collector. You're still going to have dust in the air. There's always going to be dust in the air. You're going to come back and you're going to see all this stuff laying on your machine. Okay, on the rails, on the screws, it doesn't really matter. So with that in mind, keep cleaning your machine, keep maintaining it, and it will last you a very long time. Okay? If you liked the video, please click like. Please subscribe to our channel. It's free and helps increase visibility, allowing us to grow our channel and provide more videos like this one. As always, come back to the shop and have a great day.